Today, we're going to be taking a look at the top 25 vintage baseball card sales on eBay for December 2024. The list this month is filled with Ruth Wagner as well as Cobb, and you're going to have still plenty of Mickey Mantle cards. Our highest sale this month is $35,000, and let's take a look at some cards. All right, let's take a look at our top 25 vintage baseball card sales for December. A few rules for this video: has to be 1979 or earlier. No duplicated cards are allowed. But if there's the same card with an autograph, that's perfectly okay. For example, if there's a Ricky Henderson PSA 10 that sells, as well as a PSA 9 with the auto, I count those as two different cards. You'll see Ricky a little bit later. Also, graded or raw cards are okay. Typically in this video, you'll see all graded cards, but occasionally you'll see something raw. So I'm not going to discriminate against that format. And we're going to start off with a Bob Uecker in a PSA 10. A 1966 Topps. Now, there's two different versions of this card. There's one with a trade statement, and there's one without a trade statement. Most people know Uecker as a broadcaster, but he also played before then. Now, this card specifically is a Pop 1 in a PSA 10. And when I was doing some research on it, it sold for $1,300 back in 2015. A PSA 9 typically sells for about $500 for this card, which is still pretty strong. The sold price on this 10 was $8,999.99. Up next, we have a 1923 W515 Babe Ruth. One of his earlier strip cards. I'm not a huge fan of strip cards, but they are kind of an affordable way to get into some of the bigger players out there. I say affordable in quotes because this card itself, even as an authentic, really depends how the eye appeal is on those, but they typically sell anywhere from like $1,500 to $3,000 with nicer ones in that $2,000 to $3,000 range, as I mentioned on the slide. This 7 sold for about $9,000. An 8 is about a $10,000 card. But sometimes you'll find even cards that look as nice as this in authentic slabs. So be careful, or I wouldn't say be careful, but be picky when you find an authentic, because you can find something really nice out there, kind of for a bargain. Up next, we have a 1960 Mickey Mantle in a PSA 8. There's 37 graded higher than the 8, but there is 319 8s out there, which is quite a bit. This copy sold for $9,058. All right, we have a 1956 Roberto Clemente second year card. These you can find in both gray and white backs. The last 8.5 sale I saw for an SGC was back in 2020, where that sold for $5,400. This copy right over here sold for $9,100. We have a T206 Cobb. This is an old mill back, but it is not labeled on the slab. This is one of the older slabs, so they didn't do as much labeling back then. I kind of like how they make issues right now with non-sports. Hopefully that fixes the future. But regardless, this sold for $9,195. In our top 20, now we start off with the Martin Dihigo. This is a very tough issue out of Cuba. I've used to own a few Propagandas Montiels. I don't own any anymore, but what I will say is these cards are paper thin and super condition sensitive. Now, Dihigo is going to be your second best name in the set. The Stan Musial, if you want to call it a rookie or a pre-rookie, there are a lot of people fight online. Personally, I'd rather call this Musial a rookie than some of his earlier stuff, or not earlier stuff, but like his 48 Bowman or 49 Leaf. But I'll let all the people argue on that side of things. Regardless, this sold for about $9,500. Another comp on this, which I saw, was a PSA 2. That sold for $4,800 in 2022. But what I will say is a half a grade bump on these Propagandas Montiels are huge. That's sometimes like 2 grade differences with other vintage sets. Again, these are super condition sensitive. Most of these come out of albums and they are paper thin. So good luck even finding some of these. You'll find a lot of these that are authentic, ripped corners and stuff like that. So tough. All right, we have a Roberto Clemente 1964 Topps Giants. Topps Giants aren't super popular. You can see this 10 only sold for $10,000. It's a Pop 5 and a PSA 10. A 9 sold for $700. Imagine any other Roberto Clemente playing day card in a 10. What would that go for? We have a 1952 Jackie Robinson. First Topps card out over here. This sold for $10,300. Not too bad centering. It's still a little desired, but regardless, these 52s tend to be tough. SGC3 is about $7,000. A 5 is about $10,000. So this went pretty close to the 5 price, but I would assume it's because of the centering associated with it. We have a 1949 Leaf Babe Ruth, and you can typically find a 5 for about $7,000. This 6 which is super, super old cert, sold for about 11. What's kind of funny though is if you look at the Leaf Pop Report, there's one of these that are signed for Babe Ruth, but it wasn't Ruth that signed it. It was his wife who would sign cards. I've seen a few of them to sell before, but kind of just a fun fact if you dive into those pops. All right, number 16, we have a 1962 Mantle and SGC 8.5. There's not a lot of sales around 8 or higher on the SGC slab side of things. What I did see is a 9 sold for $66,000 back in 2021, and a PSA 8 is about $10,000. These are incredibly tough cards to find in high grade because of those wood borders. Number 15, we have a 1976 George Brett. This is a Pop 33 in a PSA 9. There's actually no 10s of this card out there, which is why the 9 is so expensive. This sells for $11,500 for a second year George. All right, we have a 1968 Topps 3D Roberto Clemente. Probably Clemente's second most popular card behind his rookie card. These a lot of people want to have in their collection. It's a super tough test issue. I believe they were distributed out in New York. And this actually outsold the last PSA 4. There was a PSA 4 sale recently that sold for $10,800. This too sold for $12,600. The front looks great. I'm curious what the back looks like on this card, or there's writing, or there's some cracking that I can't tell because it looks like it has good eye appeal for it too. On number 13, we have a T206 Piedmont 350 of Ty Cobb. I'm not a T206 expert by any means, but I do believe the Piedmont 350s do hold some sort of premium, which is why you see this selling for about $13,000. Plus, it is in A5 and has the red background, which people do desire. Red background is probably the second most popular Cobb out there. Green is number 1 just because of its scarcity, then 2. Although I like the red the best based off of design. Number 12, we have a 1949 Bowman Satchel Paige. Kind of the affordable Satchel Paige rookie card because the leaf is so expensive. In a 7, this sells for $13,000, which is still less than what the leaf would do in like a 1. I believe the 1 in a leaf is about $20,000 right now, although I haven't really stayed attention to that market as much as I probably should. Big price fluctuation though. If you go from a 7 to an 8, it jumps to $24,000. A 6, you can find about $8,500. Personally, if you're already dropping $8,500 into a card, upgrade to that 7. But there are 91 that are graded higher than the 7. 1951 Willie Mays in a PSA 5. 6 sells for about $17,000 for about $9,000. This sold for $14,000. And what I will say was with a lot of these 51 Bowmans, especially in lower grades, anywhere from like 1 through 4, so much of the price is built into the centering of the card. So sometimes you'll see nicer centered cards with a lower grade outsell higher slabs. So that's why prices are all over the place when you look those specifically up. We're going to jump into some honorable mentions before we jump into our top 10. Up first, we have a 1954 Hank Aaron in a 5.5. This sold for $7,000, the rookie card. A PSA 5 is about $5,000. A PSA 6 is about $8,000. Typically, you see 5.5s, or I wouldn't say 5.5s, but the half grades get closer to the lower grade. You typically go down, but this got a pretty strong price on it. 1952 SGC 4.5 Willie Mays, pretty good centering overall. A 5 sells for about $9,000. A 4 sells for about $7,000. So great buy on this copy. We have a 1934 Exhibits 4-in-1. What I really like about this card is you have 4 different Hall of Famers on here. You have Babe Ruth, you have Vernon Gomez, which might be a little bit more familiar as a lefty Gomez. You have Lou Gehrig on there, and then you also have Bill Dickey. And the fact that you have Ruth and Gehrig already on this card together still sells for $7,500. I think people are wasting their money putting it into Goudeys rather than cards like this. I wouldn't call it wasting your money, but I think there's more value out there once you explore other Babe Ruth cards. I really like this one personally. What I will say is this is the highest sale on record, at least based off of VCP. There are 9 higher graded copies. There was one autographed, which obviously did outsell the highest right here, but autograph is going to be a little bit different, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in this presentation. Another authentic over here of Walter Johnson. And what I found... Okay, we're jumping into a authentic of a 1915 Crackerjack Walter Johnson. This is second year Crackerjack card. What I find interesting about this is it looks like the same card sold twice. So it looks like someone purchased this originally on eBay for $8,000, sent it to SGC, and it got authentic min size, and then it went to auction REA and sold for $4,200 after that. So I'm not too sure what's going on with this card, but I still want to share it with you guys because it is a super sharp authentic and technically is not trimmed. I think that's a great buy if you get them in size like that. We have a 2.5 E92 Dockman of Hannes Wagner. There's two different Wagners in there. You have one throwing, you have one him batting. And this went for about the going rate of a PSA 2. This copy over here sold for $8,100. A 1980 Ricky Henderson. You're going to see a big Ricky Henderson pump in prices for a little bit, and then it's going to go down just because of his recent death. This non-auto in a PSA 9 sells for about $2,300. You add the autograph on here, $8,600. So someone got a bunch of value on this, especially if they got it signed at shows. Ricky would go to a ton of card shows or had a ton of different private signings out there. I saw a video on Instagram a while ago. I think someone had a stack of like 50 Ricky Henderson rookies that they were getting signed. So I'm curious if any of those ended up getting the 9 with a 10 autograph out there. Nolan Ryan, Jerry Kuzman rookie card in a PSA 8. I put this on here just to say I recently wrote an article for Topps on Nolan Ryan's 4 rookie cards. So if you want to check that out, I'm going to put a link down below in the comment section. A 9 sells for about $68,000. A 7 sells for about $2,800. This 8 sold for $8,600. 1955 Hank Aaron in a PSA 8. It's a pop 282 in a PSA 8. 7 sells for about $2,500. This copy right over here sold for $8,765. All right, let's jump into our top 10. And we're going to start off our top 10 with a 1955 Roberto Clemente rookie in a PSA 7. There's 138 of these that are going to be graded higher. A PSA 8 sells for about $60,000. A PSA 6 sells for about $6,000. This copy over here sold for $15,000. Next, we have a 1951 Bowman Mickey Mantle with terrible centering top to bottom and also technically left to right. A PSA 4 is about $16,000. I'm kind of confused with this comp, to be honest with you. I know the corners are sharp, but the centering is pretty awful. We have a 1911 M116 Hannes Wagner with the pastel background. There's 2 different backgrounds out there. You could also find this with a blue background. And this authentic went for about the going rate of an SGC 3. Another Cobb in a 350. There's actually a lot of 350s, Piedmont 350s that sold recently. This in a 5 sold for $17,450. Number 6, we have a 1938 Gaudi Joe DiMaggio. This is the plain background. There's another version that has cartoons. Some people hate it. Some people love it. It's a very polarizing card in the hobby. A PSA 8 sells for about $63,000. There's 14 graded higher than the 7. It is an old cert, by the way. All right, we're jumping into our top 5. We have a 1910 Tip-Top Bred Hannes Wagner in a 1. This card, for some reason, has been selling quite a bit. I think it's like 3 or 4 months in a row that we've had either authentic or low grade Tip-Top Bred Wagners sell. So I don't know if like one person had a bunch of them, decided to sell off, or there was a few recent comps and everyone decided with this card it's a great time to sell. They've always been towards the top of these videos as well. This copy over here sold for $20,500. Number 4, we have a 1934 Gaudi Lou Gehrig, and you can see at the bottom it says Lou Gehrig says. He is one of 2 players represented at the bottom with a banner. Do you know who that second player is? Make sure to leave a comment down below. This 6 sold for $21,000. It is an old cert. A 7 sells for about $30,000. A PSA 5 sells for $10,000. Number 3, we have a 1933 Gaudi Babe Ruth number 181. This is the green background. There's 4 different Gaudi Ruths out there. A PSA 4 sells for about $18,000. This 5 sold for $21,438. Number 2 is going to be a Jackie Robinson 1949 Leaf. From comps, what I was researching, this is the highest BVG sale on record, and it's about the going rate of a PSA 5. It sold for $23,150. You know what number 1 is? Ty Cobb 350/30 authentic altar. So I'm curious if the back of the 350/30 is extremely scarce with this specific pose or not, and that's probably why it got such a premium. But yeah, $35,000 for this copy. And yeah, that is it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm gonna put our playlist of baseball recaps here right now. And if you want to check out some of the other eBay recaps, I have stuff for non-sports, junk wax, vintage football, as well as vintage basketball. Thank you for our channel members, and I'll catch you guys in another